Right ahead, Mr. President.
Call to order the meeting of the Board of Directors of Elton Butte Irrigation District for Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. I will note at this time, we do not have a quorum present. We will proceed with the items that do not require a quorum. Mr. Garai, would you please lead us through the invocation? Well, give us.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this day and your blessing upon all those gathered here. Guide us and help us to make the right decisions and choices. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Smith, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to God of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to the introduction of guests. We'll start with the folks present.
Karen Byron, EBID.
Madam Secretary, would you please introduce those that are with us online?
Yes, Mr. President. I have Marcy Teague, Anthony Calling with NMDA, Delise Masil with EBID, Kay Maynard, Dr. King, Sarah Brodwin with the BOR. And that'll be all, Mr. President.
Very good. All right, I am going to table all items that require a quorum. President. I believe brings us to item 16, which is the Water Resources Committee report. So that is in your packet and it has a visual aid. So the Water Resources Committee met to continue discussing how to create a formal policy for a release date policy. When I had last reported to you, Dr. King had created a draft phase-in decision tree. The Water Resources Committee met and reviewed that draft. That is included in the attachment. The attachment that's in the packet. It is the last page of the packet of yours. The decision matrix or decision tree is intended to be used by this board and the operations department of the district with an expected decision date of March 1st, shortly thereafter for our board meetings. The first item to be considered is the EBID allotment. How much water is in the reservoir and what would the allotment to our members be given that amount of water? From that, we then look at whether or not the snowpack is greater than or less than 150% of the median for that date of the year. And then finally, we look at the expected release date for our sister district. The numbers in the draft decision tree aren't really intended to be definitive. They are meant to be illustrative of the potential decision tree used to set up a start date. My immediate impression was I was surprised how quickly it became very complex. How the interaction between just those three items that swing the EBID start date, really by a month all the way out at March 1st. Randy, before I, ask the board for their input, do you have thoughts on the process we've used to develop this, or if, this is a good idea, or?
Well, it's a start. I mean, nothing gets perfect on the first go around, but it sets us to a beginning point to figure where we need to be and start dates for depending on our snowpack. I agree with it.
So the feedback we're looking for is, you know, whether or not this sort of rigid framework is what is appropriate to help our members better plan for irrigation season, as well as guiding the board so that our actions are less ad hoc and more administrative. James?
So just, maybe you could walk me, like, so this past 24 season, how would it have worked?
So the past,
What date would it come out?
so the past season, on March 1st, my recollection was there was enough water in the reservoir to allot 8 inches, I think. My recollection. So that would have put us in the 6 to 12 inch category for the
Okay.
EBID allotment. The snowpack at that time was less than 150% of median. And so June 1st becomes the, it is what we have.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
And so then the next question, so the biggest issue occurs when we have very little water in the reservoir and a large potential runoff. It is to the greatest benefit of not only our members, but the region to put that water to beneficial use as rapidly as possible, as opposed to simply filling the reservoir and let it evaporate for a year before we take delivery of it. So if there was a large, if the snowpack had been greater than 150%, the next piece to consider was, when is our sister district planning to be in the river, and to attempt to have a release date that roughly aligns with that. That's in order to maximize the efficiencies of our deliveries. It also can improve the ability of us to actually get the water to our members for whatever water is in the reservoir. The reason we don't just release water on March 15th if there's a large snowpack and a small amount of water in the reservoir is running out of water before the runoff gets there is really bad for efficiency as well as for the planning of our members. So reclamation, rightfully so, will not allocate water that's not in the reservoir. So therefore, we're delivering water that would only last 45 days, hoping that more water comes in before that 45 days runs out.
Raphael, Mr. President, can we work through a few more of these scenarios? So suppose there is an EBID allotment of slightly greater than 18 inches, so we're in the very bottom,
Okay,
EBID allotment path. And then the snowpack is, say, less than 150, and we release on April the 1st. So rule of thumb, about every 6 inches gives a month of irrigation, right?
for every 4 inches gives a month of season.
So this would give us 4.5 months of season. About,
Yes,
put us turning off somewhere in the middle of August.
correct.
Wouldn't it make more sense to start it a little bit later and turn off closer to middle of September? Or is the probability of, like, the chance of a big monsoon that deters us from using it?
So, the April 1st release would assume that EP1 is releasing sometime in March. And so the question is, how long do we want to have our sister district in the river without us also running water? So we are extending the amount of time that the river is running. And during that time, the losses to the system are borne by the constituents of EBID. So it also says that if EP1 is not releasing until April 1st, that we'd be looking at an April 15th date, which pushes it out to the end of August, which is generally the time that demand starts to fall off. And so it's a good time to target for the end of our season. And then if we have a large monsoon, it would extend the season by some amount.
And then another perennial complaint of mine is that I don't like using median snowpack when it still includes the wet years. I think that it should only include the dry years, and then we should adjust that 150% to make more sense of it.
So what do you think would be, so is there a different metric we should be using? Or do you think we should have a different standard for how big the snowpack needs to be before we're adjusting releasing it?
So snowpack, is this snowpack at all elevations, or is this snowpack at just certain, like,
Watershed
snow
zone.
sites at like higher elevations?
So that's a very good question. I'm gonna give you my understanding to it, and then I'm gonna throw Dr. Fox under the bus. You know, the runoff isn't specifically the area that he focuses on at EBID, but I expect him to be more knowledgeable than I am. When we're looking at percentage of total snowpack, NRCS has a basin figure that they give for our watershed. That includes all of the snow-tail sites that they include in that, which is low elevation and high elevation. I do not know how they combine those, if it's a simple average of the sites, if it is somehow weighted based on the amount of snow or the amount of runoff expected. But it is that combined amount that we would be looking at to get a single figure. Dr. Fox.
Well, Mr. President, I would most likely refer to Dr. King on this topic. However, I would offer that I think that your characterization is basically correct. But I would offer also that more weight, if you will, is given to the upper watershed. Just given the fact that, well, that's where the bulk, right, of the precipitation is expected. I would also offer that the NRCS is presently undergoing revisions with respect to how they conduct their forecasting. In fact, there is a pretty recent publication out there that I have reviewed and I think is pretty solid science. I think they're trending in the correct direction with respect to Mr. Arpel's, question and interest with respect to, well, what are we really talking about here? I would say that that's essentially anybody's guess. Insofar as, forecasting is inherently uncertain. And so if we err to the side of being cautious and conservative, which is what I think Mr. Raphael says is leaning toward, I think that's probably wise. That said, I would offer that Dr. King probably has some insight on this topic.
Present. Oh, Dr. King is present. Before I recognize Dr. King, I want to note that Mr. Colquitt has arrived. At this point in time, we have a quorum. We will finish this agenda item and then return to the tabled item. Good morning, Dr. King. Would you mind giving your thoughts on that question?
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eric was exactly right here. When putting this together, what I had intended is for the snowpack, a couple of things here. You're right that the snowpack varies a lot with elevation, and we tend to have a lot of snow at high elevation, but a lot of area at lower elevation. And I had played around with Dr. Blair a little bit here on coming up with some way to integrate more than what the current NRCS snowtail does. But the simplest case would be to take what you see here, and I hope you're seeing my screen okay with the
Yes.
snow time map. Okay. In the Rio Grande, we've got the headwaters, the upper Rio Grande, what do they call this? Is this the Elephant Butte Reach? And then down here, there's the Caballo Reach. It's not showing up because there's no snow yet. These numbers that you see up here now are incorrect. They've got a bug in there somewhere. But the focus would be on the headwaters and the upper Rio Grande, which basically is the Rio Grande watershed above Otoe Gauge, because that's where the big snow lives. If you look at the charts, this one is for the upper Rio Grande. You see we're plugging along down here. By March 1st, we would expect you see that you're well up approaching peak median snow water equivalent. So you've got a pretty good handle on what's happening, although in March and even April, we've seen big storms come in and completely change the look of the water here. We're down here right now. You see this little blip, and then some of it's already melted off. Same with the upper Rio Grande. So basically that number in the simplest case would simply be the average of these two. You see that this one is at 316% of median. This one is at 135% of median. That's why we don't make any decisions right now. It's because you're talking, you're getting close to this divide by zero kind of numbers where any snow is, you see, there just isn't very much snow there, but the percentage numbers are kind of ridiculous. So by March 1st, number one, the numbers are more meaningful. And number two, the forecasts are a lot more reliable because we're closer to the actual event. You get, the January and February forecasts are pretty much throwaway. But my intention in the simplest case would be to simply average those two, the actual numbers on March 1st.
Mr. Rovirosa. Dr. King, what fraction of our total water comes from the headwaters and what fraction comes from the upper Rio Grande?
The number I recall is 80% is from snow melt, the spring runoff. I'd have to go through and do a little hydrograph separation to get an actual number, but for general concept, 80% from snow melt up there and 20% from monsoons, whatever else.
So which fraction, so those two geographical areas, what fraction comes from the top one and what fraction comes from the middle one, from the one that's currently red? That's upper Rio Grande, right?
You're talking about these two up here?
Yes.
I don't have an answer. So how much comes from the headwaters and how much from the upper is what you're asking?
Right, that's correct, yes. Because I'm thinking a simple average would give us the correct number. I think we have to.
You're suggesting a weighted average?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility.
And
it would take a little more analysis, but that certainly could do a weighted average. I would imagine that something on the order of, I would weight most heavily the headwaters. It's probably greater than half, but it's not an analysis I've done.
Okay, and do these take into account snowpack at low elevations, like in the is it San Luis Valley? Yeah, do they take into account snowpack in the very bottom of the San Luis Valley?
Well, what it's calculating based on is the dots you see. Those are the snow tail gauges. And again, they're having technical difficulties with this map. It's been stuck on 51% forever. But when you go into the actual, you can look at individual gauges here, and it does show the actual there, but you have to open up the gauges and look at them. But it does not weight heavily on the floor of the valley. It weights on the San Juan and Sangre de Cristo Mountains.
And my recollection, Dr. King, the lowest elevation snow tell site is about 9,000 feet. One called Upper Rio Grande that is typically the low elevation.
Hang on. See, there's one at 11, there's one at 11.
There were 9,000 right there. Down.
Actually, might be able to pull that up another place.
So during the wet years, was there snow on the valley floor consistently? There was. So, you know, if we don't have snow tells there, then I don't think that the data we're getting is really represented.
Here's your elevation. These don't exactly correspond, but yeah, probably 9,000 feet is a good estimate there.
And the valley floor is substantially lower than that. It's about 6,000 in Alamosa. Is that right?
I don't remember.
So,
But what I was going to say is you do have a lot of, you do have snow on the valley floor for sure. But when you look at, let's just go up here and pull up Wolf Creek. If you look at the snow water equivalent numbers, you know, you're looking at 35 inches of snow water equivalent as the peak, median peak here. That is, if you took the snowpack that's there and melted it, it would be about 3 feet of water. That's a lot of water. When you get down on the valley floor, as I mentioned, it's a lot of area, but you probably only have a few inches of snow water equivalent, even if the snow is, you know, 2 feet deep.
so in this, you know, this is my farmer interpretation. In this, what we're interested in is snowpack that will turn into runoff. If the valley floor has, you know, a foot of snow on it that turns into 2 inches of water, most of that is going into soil moisture in the valley.
That's right. You have a lot less runoff efficiency at the lower elevations as well.
All of that said, this is the kind of feedback that we're looking for. Mr. Roby wrote that, is there an avenue you would like the Water Resource Committee to pursue for the predictive portion of this, which is the, all right, how much water are we predicting arrives at the reservoir?
So just a couple more questions for Dr. King, and I'll finish. So, Dr. King, is there a way that you can show us right now what the median looked like back in 2005?
Yes, give me just a sec here. Okay, let me go, I'll take upper. And come in here, and I'll come down here and turn on 2005, you said?
The median, not just the year, the actual median for like the last 20 or 30 years or whatever it is that this chart shows us.
This is the median for the last, for,
As of now, but 25 years ago, where was that green line?
let's see.
Well, Dr. King is doodling, I will mention, I have seen that number. Usually it's buried in another report. So
It has, the median has definitely gone down, and I was doing exactly this analysis. I don't remember where I got those numbers. They're out there somewhere, but it has gone down significantly.
there's a link at the bottom of this that talks about the 30-year hydroclimatic norms. I don't know if that gets us to a place or not.
So my point is that we're treating this as if it were a smooth function, and it's not. It's kind of like a step function. It's on or off.
I'm with Rob on the data is not, I believe.
the way NRCS does this, and a lot of the agencies do the same thing with hydrologic data on the medians and averages, is every decade they update by 1 decade. So you see now that we're looking at 1991 to 2020. Before 2020, we were doing 1981 to 2010. And so every decade they update. I will also say that the first, if you know, you all are interested in pursuing this general structure, my first step would be to get in touch with NRCS and talk about exactly what it is we want to use as our indicator there. They've got very good climate scientists. I've worked with them in the past, and I think they could really be a lot of help in refining this to come up with a snowpack indicator that best correlates with actual spring runoff.
So where I was getting at with this is, I think that 150% is just not complex enough, because just like we saw last year, we were above median snowpack, but way below median runoff. So it's not indicative of.
I agree, and the margin of error, according to NRCS, is they can be up to 12% any given year, margin of error. And so if you're using 150%, you can err on 12% plus or minus, sometimes as high as 30% a given year. And so that data is not a reliable source of information. I mean, it's very hard to predict. I'm not, bash them by any means. They know it's hard to predict, and they've recognized that. Rafa was a part of that conversation too. And so that's why I think Rafa gets a lot of this background information, that he knows that the underlying data isn't actually very well supported.
Mr. Sloan, so just real quick, in my opinion, I think this is good. I think you guys are on the right track. I think the snowpack, not saying it's not important, but if you look at a lot of the stuff, a lot of it's how much water in the lake at that time. So I think if you guys can figure out some, try to work some better numbers together on the snowpack, but I think this is great for the future, because then you can send it out to farmer, and farmer can kind of know like where we're at. This is kind of where we're going to be at, and for future boards, it kind of takes a little bit of the guessing game and stuff. So in my opinion, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're on the right track. I think it's good.
Good start.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would, Mr. Chairman, I would also add that it is inherent and unavoidable that you're going to be dealing with a large bit of uncertainty, even on March 1st. There's no two ways about that. And we have erred on the side of conservatism. The reason I threw 150% in there is because somewhere between 100 and 150, well, at 100% of median, we get well below average runoff. That's consistent at this point. But as you start to ratchet up, you get, it's like there's a fixed cost of getting the water off the mountains into the river. And once you've covered that fixed cost, the marginal return of each percent of snowpack is larger than it, so 150% is where you start to get decent runoff, I guess is the way I'd put it. Or somewhere between 100 and 150 is where you start to get decent runoff. And that's very qualitative. There's a lot of uncertainty and there's no avoiding it.
It turns out predictions are difficult, especially about the future. So, I wanted to follow up on one of the questions Mr. Rosa had about the rolling 30-year average. It does change, it does shift. You mentioned something like if it's on or off, it's less of a sliding scale, and I would disagree with that some. Again, this is the farmer view, not having analyzed it, just like, no, it's kind of what I've seen in the data. If you took the wettest 30-year period over the last 100 years, and you were to assign it a unit, a number that has the amount of water, I don't know what the units would be or anything, but if it was about 30, the driest would be about 25. It's not this huge difference in the snowpack. It is that at that margin, it makes a tremendous difference in the amount of water that reaches the reservoir. And so I'm not sure that just trying to include drier periods or exclude wetter periods gets us to a more predictive number. It may be that the 150% is inadequate for our predicted needs. But I don't think that by pulling in other data, it will somehow wildly swing this, that it then becomes clear, whereas now it's less clear. If we were simply to remove the 90s and say we're gonna take the 70s, well, it's hard. When you just cherry pick the years, it's hard. But if you just take the last, it's tough. If you cherry pick the years, you would get a wider swing, like the 3 wettest decades, just whatever those decades are, and you took those, it would be a much wider swing of the 3 driest decades. But the climate patterns don't tend to do that. They swing in these multi-decadal oscillations.
Well, that's decades, they're multi-decadal oscillations, but it seems like they're quick because we have water all throughout the 90s and then in the 2000s we didn't have.
And it's a marginal change.
Right, and so I think what we should be doing is comparing what we're in right now to the 2000s and the 2010s versus including 80s and 90s. I don't think we need 30 years of data, but we just need 20.
Well, but consider also, I mean, that if you narrow the focus there, you know, then you're gonna capture things like, the catastrophic wildfires that we've had, you know, in recent years. And I absolutely guarantee you that has a major impact, of course, you know, on what, the runoff scenario is gonna look like.
So it seems like we should wait it even more now that that's what's gonna happen going forward.
Perhaps, but I think the take home here is that there's just inherent uncertainty in this forecasting endeavor, no matter how you slice it. And so that is why, which of course is a fact not lost on anybody here, that Dr. King makes recommendations to the board with respect to an allotment when there's effectively water in the reservoir, right? And so, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, that's, I think, kind of where we're at. You know, it's great to, you know, attempt to forecast for planning purposes. I get that totally, right? But unless and until it's in the bank, you know, we just got to adapt to a sort of margin of uncertainty in the planning realm. That's how I see it.
I agree, but if we're gonna be using a more rigid tool, I think that we should try to make our forecast for snowpack a little bit more accurate and it's a little more complex.
Mr. President.
So the first thing is we should use a shorter time frame. I think Rafa is exactly right on that. And that's because of the data integrity of the past. Their calculations, their algorithms, their metrics are getting better. Especially in recent years now that they're taking into account soil moisture. 10, 15, 20 years ago, they weren't taking that into account. And so therefore their numbers are more accurate in recent terms. And for statistical anomalies such as wildfire, whatever, that's what the median's designed for, is to remove statistical anomalies in the data.
Thank you, Mr. Brandoy. Dr. Fox, Dr. King, help me out with a thought I'm having about whether it's accurate or not. In our decision tree, we've got three inputs into this. And if I understand how the decision tree works, the first.
I'm in a meeting.
Marcia, would you mute, please? The first input is more impactful than the second input, and the second input is more impactful than the third input. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So then looking at this, the place where we have the most certainty is the allotment. That's water that's in the reservoir. My next question would be, which has more certainty? The current percentage of snowpack or EP1's predicted release date on the 1st of March?
The reason they're in that order is not based on the uncertainty associated with it, but on the information content. And one thing I would stress here is that with the snowpack, don't try to get this down to, two significant figures even. What it's really trying to get at is there a good snowpack or is there not a good snowpack? And it's a very broad term. It's the uncertainty that we deal with. The forecasting that NRCS does really has not gotten much better. In fact, it's gotten worse in the last couple of decades, largely because it's a statistical forecasting method that assumes stationarity, that the current behavior is similar to the historical behavior, and that's not what we're actually seeing. But what I, there is uncertainty here that you just can't get rid of. You just have to live with it, and we always have. You can get in there and calculate, do all sorts of analyses. And there's so much, we've only got 3 indicators here, and there's so much more than that. One thing that I would recommend certainly is that due to the simple nature of this decision tree that we've simplified it down to these 3 factors. And these 3 factors include a lot of other stuff. For example, well, what about EP1's carryover? Well, that's inherently built into their start date. So, try to, you see that as we add additional indicators, you get what's called the curse of dimensionality, where your alternatives just explode on you. You can see it starting to explode there when we're at EP1 start date. Imagine if we added another indicator, you'd have, for each of those, you'd have 3 more outcomes, and it just, it explodes exponentially. But certainly we want to come up with an indicator that is reflective on the snowpack. That's the one with the most uncertainty in it. But you are not going to get it down to anywhere near as certain as EP1 start date or EBID's allotment.
Okay, we discussed this more at length than I anticipated to do with the entire board. But I think we've got some very good input. I am going to suggest that if Mr. Rovirosa is available at our next Water Resources Committee meeting, that we bring him in as a guest. We only have 3 board members on that committee, so we remain under a quorum. And that we explore some ideas for the predictive element of this matrix. Any other comments from the board before we move on to the rest of the report? Hearing none. Board also, we had a guest at our last committee meeting that was Mr. Jason Kasuga from the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. He gave a brief presentation on the status of water running through the Middle Rio Grande currently, and the current operations at the tail of the low flow conveyance channel. I appreciated his attendance and look forward to more opportunities to share information and to collaborate in the things we're doing to try to improve the hydrologic reality along the Rio Grande. With that, we are still here. We are going to go back to the tabled items on the agenda. Thank you all for your patience as we went through that, and I appreciate the input very much. Item 4, approval of board minutes. The minutes for the October 9th, 2024 meeting are in your board packet. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes. I have a motion for Mr. Sloan to approve the minutes as presented, seconded by Mr. Dry. Any further discussion? Hearing hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion carries. I received a letter of resignation from, Mr. Lack following the last board meeting. That letter of resignation was given to, Mr. Smith. It is now announced to all of you that, Mr. Lack has resigned from the board of directors. Following the meeting, I asked Mr. Garai, if he would form a committee of himself and members of the Elk Butte Irrigation District in the Rincon area to be able to do a search for a replacement board member. Mr. Garai, do you have anything you'd like to report on that?
At this point, we have Donnie Hackey and Bill Porter and myself looking for a suitable candidate. Now that we have officially accepted Joe Pollack's resignation, we will move forward in finding a candidate to replace him.
Thank you, Mr. Garai. I've asked Mr. Garai to try to have a candidate ready for our next board meeting, candidate or candidates, for us to make a selection and appoint a board member for precinct 2. Any questions regarding the resignation of Mr. Lack? That brings us to item 6, the approval of the fiscal year 24 budget amendment resolution 2024-09. Is that Ms. Byram or Mr. Franklin?
Byram.
Good breeze. Where's the share?
There's the black screen, go down to Zoom.
Go to Zoom, it's the one right here.
Yeah, that has Dr. King's name on it.
No,
No.
I'll go over to the mic on the bottom.
Thank you. Okay, had to go to Dr. King. Okay, sorry for the delay. Because there have been multiple, moving, targets and changes this year, this is a resolution to adopt a, updated, amended 2024 budget for the end of the year and also for the calendar year, which is needed for the DFA. This is very small, I realize.
Right.
So what this is we took the current year's budget. We looked at our actuals through September. We assumed that September would be pretty close to, or October would be pretty close to September. We took in account items we knew that had changed. We did some rounding, and that gives us our proposed end of year budget. Some items of note is we reduced the budget for special use fees, the right-of-way fees, as the numbers of applications and use fees was not as we anticipated. We increased for the kindergarten reimbursement we received. The budget for grant revenue and expenses changed due to what actually happened. This number here is actually if we had finished all of the grants completely. We had some sales of assets. We had better than forecasted investment earnings. We had some decreases in expenditures for labor. As you can see, the reduction in the contracted legal counsel and for vacancies. Things like the BOR did give us a reduction due to their postponement of some of their activities. We estimated that insurance was going to be a lot higher when we got off of the COVID rates, but it was actually still lower. We had some new software purchases. We increased our spending for grant matches, especially along the California lateral grant. And so we need budget for that. Fuel is lower, and Joe has talked about this because of we estimated at $5 a gallon. Unfortunately, it did not get that high. We need an increase for training and travel for some additional travel at the end of the year and for the end of the year district-wide training. The roof that you can hear going on right now is in this budget. And again, I mentioned the grants. I am available for questions.
Ms. Byron, what is the requirement from BFA for the level of detail in our budget that we present for them?
Well, they didn't used to require that much detail. It used to be very simple. They implemented a new system called the LG BMS. Anyway, it goes into a lot more detail than this one does. So they're trying to get more out because I guess the state legislators and agencies want more detail on how the local governments are spending money.
Thank you. I've stated numerous times in the budget process that the level of detail about, how much do we spend on the telephones versus the software? That is not a level of detail that rises to the level of governance. Other decisions that get made within the course of a year by the manager, dependent on, what the needs of the district are today. What are the revenues and other expenses that the district has? So therefore, what are we going to do to stay in balance? Is this level of detail and reconciliation of our budget going to be required every year? Mr. Friends,
So for the first thing is that you have to approve in this level of detail for this. However, in terms of presentation, we could definitely simplify it to a more simplified income statement.
thank you, I appreciate that. I'm not actually looking to, how can I simplify the presentation? This is what I need to approve, this is what I need to see. Again, ideally, what would I like to approve? The assessment, the O&M budget, the capital expenditure budget. That's it. And then whether you're buying pencils or you're hiring more employees is up to the manager to meet the needs of the district. My role in that is to say that we cannot simply consume all of the assets of the district to do O&M. And I approve that by approving the split between O&M and CapEx. What I'm hearing though is that the state wishes us to have a more detailed role in the expenditure of all of the dollars leaving the district. Is that correct?
You would be approving all of these budget adjustments. And that's what these are, the adjustments to our fiscal year 24 budget to be more in line with our actual expenditures. And so we have to go line by line, and essentially what you guys are approving is every single adjustment we've made to the pre-existing budget here.
Wow. Can we approve a simpler budget when it comes to the budget, the time of year that we are approving a budget? Or does the budget we present to the FAA have to be this detailed?
I assume if you give us authorization to do that and give you a simplified version, you should be able to do
What's the minimum level of detail BFA requires?
For their reporting, it's along the lines of this. For your approving, I would have to find out. I have
Okay.
seen in other places it be approved at this level.
Cause I'll be honest, I'm looking at this and I go, well, sure, I guess. But really, the fact that we didn't have certain positions filled, that is not a governance matter. And yet I'm expecting to approve a budget amendment reflecting that there were certain positions that didn't get filled. There's a disconnect in what I'm approving and what I actually control. And I'm concerned about that. If I approve it, I probably am expected to have some level of governance control over it. Yeah.
My understanding is you are essentially acknowledging that this is what has occurred, and you're not approving anything. You're approving the fact that we are adjusting the budget to conform to what actually happened.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate that. That semantic clarification. Other questions from the board? Hearing none, what is the will of the board?
I move to approve the resolution.
I have a motion for Mr. Sloan to approve resolution 2024-09, seconded by Mr. Colquitt. Any further discussion? Appreciate the board's indulgence in my questions. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Due to the chair, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously.
Most quickly, during which kind of topics, I was just trying to say that we have probably an additional 650,000 that we're looking to roll forward in the fiscal year 25 budget, and so we'll probably do an adjustment for beginning cash for fiscal year 25. But just kind of where we ended out the year, I can do another presentation in December, but healthy year.
So I do not have a request for you to present more than you are currently presenting in our monthly financial update. Is there any request from the board for Mr. Franjoy to provide further details for his financial report? As it stands right now, Mr. Franjoy, you're presenting. Thank you very much, Mr. Byron. It brings us to item 7, approval of RFP for general legal services. Is there a presenter for that item? Hearing none. Oh, Mr. Brandon.
You'll have to give me a minute, I gotta open it.
Maybe it's like a musical. They're yelling at each other through song.
So this is the contract for general legal counsel. And this will be,
Would you send that with me?
yes.
Thank you.
And I'll just kind of do this cover page, but I can outline maybe the dates below. This will be due Wednesday, November 27th of this month at 2 p.m. For all proposals And this is for the scope of work for general legal services as outlined here. And I can state these or we can read those in here.
Does anyone needing to read the RFP proposal? Thank you.
Okay. And then just the general dates and deadlines here.
So things I want to highlight here. There's an oral presentation scheduled for Wednesday, December 4th.
That's correct.
So, again, we will try to, I will work to ensure that all board members are notified of when that is, but I want to note it now. There will be an ability for board members to observe the oral presentations that will occur Wednesday, December 4th.
Mr. President, so we're wanting another special board meeting.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's
I
how
believe
you,
the answer to that is yes. So there was clearly interest from the board to observe the oral presentations of the previous RFP. I'm going to suggest that there's an oral presentation for an RFP. We need to schedule, we need to notice board meeting as such. And I'm not sure, maybe it's just an ordinary notice. I don't know how to handle that, Mr. Lutz. We're not making a decision, but that said, there could very likely be a quorum of board members sitting in a room.
I would notice it as in the same manner as it was noticed for the firearm meeting.
Okay,
closed session special board meeting.
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The other thing I wanted to note is that the deadline is, I do believe, 2 p.m. the day before Thanksgiving. And just confirm, Mr. Smith, that meets the requirements of when your staff is available.
Yep,
Thank you.
someone will be here.
Very good. Any other questions? Anything else you would like to present on this, Mr. President?
Nope, that should be it.
What's the will of the board?
I move to approve this RFP.
I have a motion, Mr. Colquitt, to approve the RFP for
General legal services.
thank you. Is that how it's intended?
It's
Yeah.
general for professional legal services.
Thank you. I have a motion, Mr. Colquitt, to approve the RFP for professional legal services. Seconded by Mr. Sloan. Seconded by Mr. Sloan.
Randall Sloan.
Seconded by Mr. Garide. Motion made by Mr. Colquitt, seconded by Mr. Garide. The motion is to approve the RFP for professional legal services. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Approval of extension of Mr. Esslinger's employment. Mr. Smith.
Because we are a para entity, Mr. Edlinger, when retired, which is his contract, will be operating under as a consultant, have to be approved by para. And the timing was not met, make that effective November 1st. I have the need of him advising me and attending a number of meetings and conferences in the month of November. So the solution is, or proposed to extend Gary's employment through the end of November, and his consulting contract would then be effective December 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions from the board?
I move to approve the modification to Mr. Esslinger's contract. That is, Mr. Smith's proposal.
Extension of his employment, I don't believe, as a contract. I have a motion from Mr. Robbie Rosa to extend Mr. Esslinger's employment. Is there a date we're extending it to?
For the month of November.
December 1st. Through December 1st, seconded by Mr. Colquitt. Mr. Esslinger, is that acceptable? Are you available to continue to be employed by Elephant Irrigation?
Yes, that's acceptable.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Is present, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. It brings us to item 9, the approval of the sole source contract for expert testimony. Mr. Essinger. And in conjunction with that, there's an approval of the sole source contract for consulting services to Living Waters Consulting. With our closely tied. Mr. Smith.
So we have a need for 2 contracts with Mr. Esslinger, one for his expert services, as that would remain confidential. And I believe you all have a copy of that contract. And then the second contract is for his consulting services, being available to me, answering questions and providing advice and tours, similar to what his contract was before, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions from the board? I have a question regarding the compensation structure of the 2 contracts. The contract to Living Waters has the same compensation structure, which includes non-court research meetings and short testimony and prep. The scope of work does not include any expert witness services. And so I was just curious about that, if that is a satisfactory, I believe the dollar amount is correct. I just wanted to know if that is a satisfactory compensation structure to meet the scope of work in the contract. Mr. Liu.
Well, and I'm wondering on that, if court testimony and prep is anticipated for the consultant portion of the contract, since it's not. The expert witness aspect of it was separated out because expert witnesses contracts are not subject to procurement. Consulting is subject to sole source procurement. And it may have been something that I just missed, but they were kind of the same. Mr. Franzler, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's something I just looked up, I wonder. If
No, I believe that those rates are gonna be, the consulting aspect of advising EBID staff and board members on potential legal strategies, et cetera. With consulting. An expert witness will be actually on the stand working on strategy there. I don't think it's negative to have it in. I think it's just added positive to this rates. If you wish to change the description, we can.
I just want to be sure that again, that Mr. Esslinger is able to work under that rate structure with the scope of work in the contract. I'm just going to read the scope of work out loud. A contractor shall perform consulting work at the direction of the district, its treasurer manager, and counsel as necessary in his area of expertise as a historian with specialized knowledge and institutional knowledge regarding recent history of the district, including long-term strategic planning and policy matters. Contractor shall assist with training and transition of the contractor's successor in the role of treasurer manager, effective November 1st, 2024. The contractor shall have access to all district documents and historic files to carry out this scope of work. This is the compensation table here. I'll allow Mr. Esslinger to perform that scope of work under the expected $100 an hour.
I could be wrong, but because the scope of work on the first contract is this expert witness. So to bill everything under that one, remove it from this one. Correct?
So they're gonna be, basically everything that's non-court is under the second contract. And as far as I read that, that's anything that I ask Harry to do that he is willing to do that is not court related. Attending meeting tours, whatever the case may be, it's everything besides actual courtroom litigation preparation.
I agree with the intent. That is my understanding of it as well, having read the 2 contracts. Do we need to amend the wording of the compensation table properly effectuate that conflict.
Right, and Mr. President, if I may, you know, I was wondering and inviting myself to fall on the sword if anyone wanted to take the invitation. That maybe these have been cut and pasted for both contracts, but
I'm not looking to point a finger at all,
Yeah.
I'm just looking to make it right.
right, but Mr. Francois suggested an independent basis by which the consultant could be involved in consulting outside of being an expert witness. If it was a case where he was not designated as an expert witness, for example, which then would turn to your question about, does the scope of work need to be amended to make it clear that that can be done so that it's clear that a different rate could be applied to those? Am I?
Yes,
I believe that.
I want to be sure that there's a compensation item that says, Mr. Esslinger, we would like to attend this conference and to introduce Mr. Smith to other people and help facilitate continued relationships.
So
That's
this,
clearly not a litigation matter.
yeah, so the suggestion might be is to work perhaps on the first bullet point to add some language to make it clear that that is a possibility. Because I think Joa is correct, that there could be situations where Mr. Esslinger's company is consulting on matters in which he is not a designated expert. And the contract should have that room. And the question would be, do we feel comfortable with the scope of work, or should we add something to address the president's concern? Leaning towards, could probably tell, potentially looking to amend that scope of work just to make it clear.
And I was not concerned with the scope of work. I was simply concerned with whether or not the compensation table had something, you know, a compensation rate that covered all of the things in the scope of work. Because there isn't anything in the scope of work about expert testimony for the LLC.
Right.
And presumably the LLC is not an expert witness, Mr. Esslinger is.
Correct. And if it's believed that consulting work, just as it presented in the scope of work, encompasses what Mr. Francois indicated, then I think the compensation table is correct, and it would be for Mr. Esslinger just to be straightforward in assessing the correct rate for the work that he's doing, as then reviewed by finance when they review the bills.
Thank you. To summarize, the compensation table is adequate to cover the scope of work in the contract to Living Waters.
Yes, sir.
Consulting.
Sorry if that was a torturous path.
No, it's okay. It was, we got all the reasons why it's okay on the record, and I appreciate that very much. Other questions?
We operate them together, or did you separate?
We can act on them.
I move to approve the expert contract for Esslinger and also the contract for Living Waters.
I have a motion for Mr. Sloan to approve the sole source contracts to Mr. Esslinger and Living Waters Consulting, seconded by Mr. Dry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. We have the approval of a contract for professional services to D-Leg Electrical Engineering. Any questions? This is a renewal, is that correct?
Yes.
This is a renewal of an existing awarded contract.
Actually, yeah.
You're 404.
Thank you. This will be the last renewal of this. The last renewal of this contract under RFP. Questions on the contract?
I move to approve the contract.
I have a motion for Mr. Sloan to approve the professional services contract with D-Lake Electrical Engineering, seconded by Mr. Roby Rosa. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being as present, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Item 12. Lateral agreement. Mr. Luce, do you have anything you'd like to comment on this?
Yes, Mr. President, Ms. Byron brought this to my attention, under state law and as applicable federal law. If a bank holds public funds, it has to have certain collateral requirements to protect those public funds. Usually about one half of whatever it holds. Bank of Montreal, which is the successor of Bank of the West, it has a entity in which it contracts to provide that collateral and administer it, which is Bank of New York Mellon. They have requested this custodian agreement be executed, which provides for individual representatives to be appointed by EBID to provide instructions related to any collateral issues that arise. I don't expect there to be any, but it's a formality that we go through. Not to put you on the spot, but is that a fair explanation? And as you understand it, it's bad.
Yes, and also this is to change the custodian, which is the person that holds the collateral. From, it wasn't Wells Fargo when it was Bank of the West, and now it is going to be Bank of New York Mellon under BMO.
Thank you.
I believe Mr. Smith's recommendation was that it be, if I'm remembering correctly, Leah, Joa, and Karen as the three representatives.
Thank you very much. I also want to note that I appreciate including the appropriate New Mexico administrative code, to understand some background on that. So thank you very much for including that in our board packet. The collateral agreement requires any dispute to be handled in the state of New York. I don't know if that's a detail worth getting persnickety about or not. Is that an item of concern?
My father raised that with me when we were preparing for the meeting, and in a contract where there might be more active moving pieces to it, I might have concern. I would be highly surprised, and it would be a once in a lifetime situation if a dispute arose as to this particular contract. So I feel like given that, and that probably I wouldn't see it as a negotiable item with Bank of New York Mellon, I would feel comfortable in this limited circumstance having that kind of form selection clause. On other contracts, in other circumstances, we would certainly want to push back if that be something the board would do often.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. Other questions from the board? So the request from staff is to approve the BMO Bank collateral agreement, signing Joe Franzoy, Karen Byram, and Leah Diaz as the representatives for EBID. What is the will of the board? I believe I see a motion for Mr. Sloan to that effect. The motion for Mr. Sloan is to approve the BMO Bank collateral agreement contract and to appoint Joe Franzoy, Karen Byram, and Leah Diaz as the representatives for Alpha Butte Irrigation District. There is a second. Second by Mr. Roby Gross. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it. Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to item 13, approval of MOU between EBID and Doñana County regarding trails and pathways. Presentation from this.
Engineering is out on the California extension. They will not be presenting on this, but essentially this is just an agreement to work with them with mapping out GIS and things outlined in the MOU. Pretty straightforward to understand there, and engineering recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lutz.
And Mr. President, just as some background, the significance of this agreement under New Mexico state law is in 2007, there was an amendment passed to the Tort Claims Act that Samantha was instrumental in getting passed. Basically indicated if you had this kind of agreement in place, you were immune from suit for any injuries that would occur on a trail or a pathway as an irrigation district. So by entering into this agreement, it gives Alpha Butte Irrigation District significant tort immunity. Doñana County would retain potential liability. My understanding is the people that want to create and build these pathways have the capital outlay ready. They need to move this year. We've reviewed it with legal, certainly Mr. Esslinger's been working on it a long time. And, from the legal side, I would recommend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberta. Mr. President. How are the areas where the county decides to put trails selected?
Who selects what you mean?
So as Mr. Esslinger.
This particular trail in Vado was selected by the community of Vado. And it went to the legislators as a, outlay, request for a park. And, it also involved some third-party interest to fund part of the project, as well as a cooperative, agreement that EBID had with DOT for a similar request for a flooding issue on Ogeen Road that they needed to rectify. And so that, it was a combination of several things, but in the future, I would think that, the county would request, from EBID, the initiation of a park or a trail someplace, and we would then go look at it to see if it would be, advantageous for us or not.
So did the board approve the Vado Trail Park?
No, it was a license that never got, they approved the license, but it never got signed by the county, and it became an issue with the county. And finally, through working with the county, we were able to raise the license up again, which is a permit, and it describes exactly what now the trail encompasses. So once we get that license in place, it opens the door for other licenses like on roads and everything else that we need with the county to then take place. So it's in the right direction that we're approving this license and this MOU.
So suppose there are EBID banks on canals and drains that go through private property. Is there any way that the owner of the private property surrounding those banks would not have a say in those banks being turned into public trails?
No, they would have a say, because whatever the county asks for a trail anywhere, as well as the city, we then take the time to present it to the board and then meet with any constituency that would be part of that trail path. And so if they're opposed to it, then obviously the board probably wouldn't approve it.
If I can add some detail to that, it's my understanding the MOU requires the county to receive a license for any, just gonna call them trails, any trails that they wish to place on EBID property. Currently, the board of directors must approve all of those licenses. And at the time of that license hearing, any member of the public will be able to present any concerns they have about the license.
Correct.
And it has been my stated position that trails are incompatible with commercial agriculture. And I vote no on every one of them that is adjacent to farm rate tracts of water.
Just clear, this already is a park.
That is correct.
So I move to approve the contract.
The MOU, so the MOU is specifically for this, but I have a motion to approve the MOU for Mr. Sloan. Seconded by Mr. Garai. I have a question as well, Mr. Colquitt.
And maybe we've already covered this, but should we approve this? How would EBID benefit from this?
So my
It's kind
understanding
of a
of
selfish
the MOU
question.
is that the MOU
Mhm.
allows the two entities, EBID and the county in this case, to work collaboratively on how they can both use one of their properties for community benefit while engaging the tort immunity of the Trails Act. It requires an MOU. Is that correct, Mr. Lutz?
It is essentially, it requires a written agreement between the irrigation district and the use
Chair,
on the government.
the other benefit is
I don't see benefit yet.
they're responsible for maintaining.
And does Doñana County maintain stuff fairly well? And that's a sincere question. They do pretty good.
This part, right, yeah, that people use all the time.
Really? Okay.
This is really the only one I'm familiar with that is cooperatively done between the county and EBID, and it, like when I drive by them.
It's well maintained.
It's great.
And, Mr. Coker, to answer your question, in this particular license for this trail and pathway, we pipe our drain.
Okay.
So there is no maintenance on the part of EBID at all.
Okay.
It's all part of the county to maintain that portion of the pipe.
So in any given project, through the licensing process, is the role of EBID to determine if it is within the interest of EBID to grant that license. So the MOU is not specifically about that project or any other project. The MOU allows us to license projects under the umbrella of the trail. I had a question regarding, license fees. There was no discussion of license fees at all that I could find in the MOU. Did I miss any discussions about license fees?
The license fees will remain consistent with EBID's policy. The MOU is just, agreement.
I want to be sure the county understands that there are licensing fees involved with these. Okay, well, they may come to understand that at the time of their request for a license. I know that there has been some concern about how that works and the county ensuring that they're compliant with the anti-donation clause of the state constitution. Any other questions regarding the MOU between EBID and Doñana County regarding trails and pathways? Yeah, the motion was from Mr. Sloan, seconded by Mr. Garai. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any present, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Approval of the USDA notice of grant agreement. Mr. Yeah.
Well, briefly, this is the 400,000 or 400 million that was noticed to be distributed to 18 irrigation districts. We've been attending webinars, and Joa managed to put this together because it's due tomorrow. This is an application for federal assistance. It does not bind EBID to do anything. This is the first step in obtaining that $15 million, which we're working on projects and plans to spend that money. And right now, my understanding is we intend to use some of that money for finishing piping of laterals that have been started but are not yet complete. And the scope for the funding is broad. There's a lot of potential there. So this agreement, this document is due to USDA. But it doesn't actually obligate us.
I believe like the overarching purpose of this agreement is for water conservation and delivery efficiencies would be kind of what they're looking for, and that's very broad: telemetry units, piping laterals, fouling programs, however you want to save water or improve efficiency.
Thank you, Mr. Franjoy. Looking at the agreement, the project date range is from October 31st of this year to October 31st of 2029, and the estimated funding amount is $15 million. So I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
And specifically, what does the board need to approve today?
This application.
So the application in front of you is what's being asked to be approved. It's titled an application for federal assistance.
And in addition, for me to keep working through the grant process, I would need approval, to keep pursuing this grant. This application.
Okay, in the motion.
I move to approve the application as well as go pursuing this grant further.
I have a motion for Mr. Sloan, seconded by Mr. Roby Rosa, to approve the application for federal assistance and to authorize Mr. Franzoid to continue pursuing, this grant opportunity. Is that motion well stated, Mr. Franzoid? Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. NWRA sponsorship, Mr. Smith.
It's my understanding that we have provided the sponsorship for the NWRA annual meeting in the past. We're seeking your approval of a $500 sponsorship for the upcoming meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I will note that, yes, it has been my experience that we, sponsor the NWRA conference between $500 and $1,000, annually, especially because it is in New Mexico. I would encourage the board to approve the requested $500 sponsorship.
We gave 500 when they did it in DC, right?
Yeah.
You said,
I move to approve a $500 sponsorship of NWRA.
I have a motion from Mr. Rosa. I have a motion from Mr. Roby Rosa, seconded by Mr. Colquitt, to approve the $500 sponsorship to NWRA for their November conference. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing the president, the ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. We've already covered item 16. There are no further agenda items. Mr. Smith, is there any other business you wish to?
So the only other item I would mention is what I talked to you about, turkeys and hams for the employees. We have a situation where we will have to charge the employees tax if we provide them the fringe benefit of a turkey or a ham. I talked to the president. I haven't talked to anyone else about asking the board to sponsor that personally.
That is something that Mr. Smith, not open for discussion. It is something that Mr. Smith will be contacting you about if you are interested in as your individual entity sponsoring turkeys and hams for employees. I have one item to note. I spoke with Interstate Stream Commission Director Anna Risley White yesterday. Her team will be in town November 14th and 15th. The 15th, we have New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission stakeholder work group. On the 14th, Director Risley White has requested an opportunity to meet with a committee of the Board of Directors of Elton Butte Irrigation District and local legislators to discuss the intent of the task force, as well as ideas for what are projects that can be implemented to improve the hydrologic reality of our region. I told her I would present that idea to the board of directors, with the expectation that our government affairs committee would be in attendance, and the Elton Butte Irrigation District would be able to provide the venue. Mr. Smith, if you would check if it is possible for the afternoon of the 14th for EBID to utilize conference room. Mr. Etlinger.
That is the day of our general meeting scheduled for that morning, and
Boy,
27.
the
Huh?
What day is it? The 14th?
The 14th, it's for next.
I thought it was first because Thanksgiving is the 28th.
We can look at moving it if we want.
Very good. That is the announcement. Again, upon an agenda item, so we can't discuss it, but wanted to make the board and management aware of the call I received from Director Risley White yesterday and the request.
Mr. President,
Dr. Fox?
did you perhaps get a sense for, what is, thought with respect to the term hydrologic reality?
So we're just deciding whether or not I can answer that question as a non-agenda item. I'm just gonna go with yes, I can. This is my understanding of it. And in my conversations with other agencies, I believe they share a similar understanding. That if we are able to improve the supply of water in our region through various projects that either capture water that isn't otherwise captured or remove losses that otherwise are unavailable for depletion, that the reality of the available water in our area is improved. And so it is the expectation that projects improving the hydrologic reality would make available more depletable water that is currently available in a balanced hydrologic system. I hope that made some sort of sense, Dr. Fox.
More or less, I'll lean more toward more. But no, that's encouraging. I think that would lead to a productive exchange.
And one thing that has been also clear is that these discussions are not intended to resolve conflicts that may be inherent amongst water users or agencies with regards to the water in our region. It is intended to find a way that a rising tide can float everybody's boat. Thank you for the question, Dr. Fox. Is there any other announcements or business? Hearing none, we come to the end of our open session agenda. I will accept a motion to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items.
I make a motion to go into closed session. Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Colquitt, seconded by Mr. Roby Russell to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. We are in closed session. There we go. I'll accept the motion to come out of closed session.
Motion so made.
I have a motion by Mr. Sloan, seconded by Mr. Roby Rosa to come out of closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. We are in open session. I will note for the record that no items were discussed in closed session other than those items listed in the motion, which were the agenda items. Is there any further business? Hearing none, I will accept the motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Mr. Garai, seconded by Mr. Roby Rosa to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it. We are adjourned. You please take off the recording.
Motion sold.
Give me that top there.